Right. We still have people filtering in, but I will just sort of get started and folks can get caught up. So first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for joining. Um, every single one of you is a senior leader, and so first of all, we really appreciate you setting aside the time for this important meeting. Before I start, I want to profusely thank our host committee. The fact that we have such an incredible turnout of leaders is in large part due to their help convening this audience. And so our co-hosts are Ohio X, the Ohio Business Roundtable, Impact Ohio, the Ohio Educational Service Center Association, and Team NEO, which is a Jobs Ohio network member. I also want to thank the J.M. Smucker Company. They recently announced a multi-year grant to support our work here in Ohio, and frankly, none of this would be possible without their really early support for our work. And on a logistical note, and I mentioned this before, but if you haven't done so already, if you hover your mouse over your video, you'll see an ellipsis in the top right-hand corner. If you click that and you go to rename, we'd be appreciated if you just set your name as your first and last name with your organization in parentheses, so that when you break out into groups, folks can see who they're interacting with. And then finally, this session is going to be recorded, so we'll be providing a summary of the event with the recordings to all of you, and you can share those with your colleagues. But keep in mind that it is going to be recorded, and we do have at least some members of the press attending as well. So I'm Alex Kotran. I'm the co-founder and the president of the AI Education Project, and we're a national nonprofit with a mission to make fundamental AI literacy accessible to all students, especially those in underserved communities. aiEDU is working to solve one of the most critical challenges facing America, we think, and that is the economic revolution driven by artificial intelligence. Economists predict that nearly half of all jobs are at risk of automation over the next decade. The OECD says that 65% of children today are going to work in careers that don't yet exist. We're truly in the midst of an industrial revolution, and yet most schools today do not teach students anything about how AI is going to transform careers and displace others. Put differently, in a few months, 3.7 million Americans are going to graduate from high school. In Ohio, nearly 100,000 students are going to graduate, and about half of them are going to pursue career pathways that we know are at high risk of disappearing during their careers. We're failing our kids because we're not providing them with the basic knowledge about the 21st century economy so that they can make informed decisions about how to pursue prosperous career pathways. And so that's what we're trying to fix. My co-founder, Ora Tanner, built a highly engaging foundational curriculum about AI and the future of work. And we help students explore how AI is going to impact them as consumers, citizens, and most of all, workers. The reason we're here in Ohio, we actually launched our curriculum. We're a national nonprofit, but we launched last year at Firestone Community Learning Center in Akron with 300 students. And since then, we've grown more than 2,000%, reaching thousands of students across 7 states. In Ohio, we're in 18 schools. And we have burgeoning partnerships with 6 educational service centers. And this rapid growth is driven in part because the curriculum really does work. Our project-based learning approach is engaging, and it helps teachers reach students who have otherwise tuned out of their education during the pandemic. But it also is impacting learning. Nearly 1 in 5 students actually report changing their career pathway after learning about how AI will impact jobs. But our growth is also thanks to the incredibly strong reception from teachers who, by and large, understand the problem statement here. And they love the fact that they can facilitate this curriculum without any prerequisite knowledge or training. It's a non-technical course. And furthermore, because we built specifically for schools in underprivileged communities, we've been able to reach educators who were previously left out of efforts to integrate more technology education into the classroom. Over the next year, we're working with the constellation of partners, many of them here today, to scale our AI literacy content to reach 50,000 students across Ohio. And that's our goal. And we're already well on the way to reaching that. And if we're successful, Ohio will be the first state in the country to do this, to scale AI literacy in K-12. And all of you can help, whether you're a superintendent looking for accessible and affordable solutions to enhancing workforce readiness, or if you're a CEO considering how your business can better support your community, or you might be an educator considering how new learning approaches, all of you have the power to help Ohio take a leadership role in the 4th industrial revolution. And so today, You're going to be hearing from some of Ohio's foremost leaders who are working on workforce transformation to learn more about the challenges and the opportunities and the solutions in front of us. And then we'll close by breaking you all up into small groups so that you can discuss what's working and some of the challenges perhaps with your peer group. And I want to close by saying that, the AI Education Project is not a silver bullet. We're part of a vibrant community of nonprofits and educators working day in and day out in Ohio to advance STEM learning and resilient and prosperous career pathways. Many of them are here today, and we should look to all of them as examples of how this can work successfully. So with that, I want to hand the virtual mic over to my friend Chris Berry. He's the president of OhioX and one of the co-hosting organizations for some short introductory remarks. Chris.
Well, thank you, Alex, and I'm incredibly excited to be joining everyone today. But to start, I want to thank Alex and his team at the AI Education Project. When we first connected and began talking about ways that we might be able to collaborate, I couldn't have imagined a day like this coming together, especially so quickly in the middle of a pandemic. And this is an incredible gathering of leaders from across Ohio. We have elected officials and policymakers, Fortune 500 executives, startup founders and CEOs, and of course, education and civic leaders. This is an incredible testament to the power of Ohio and that we have passionate people who want to make a difference. As Alex mentioned, I'm Chris Berry. I'm the president of OhioX. We are a new statewide technology and innovation nonprofit that is working towards a big goal of helping make Ohio a leading tech hub. We're able to do our work and help create days like today because of the passion and commitment of our member organizations. Our members include some of the world's most largest and most innovative companies, some of Ohio's most exciting startups, leading universities and healthcare systems, tech-focused businesses, and more. And collectively, our members employ tens of thousands of Ohioans and have a very vested interest in workforce and education. We have many leaders from our member organizations who are joining today, and I want to thank them specifically. They help make OhioX's work possible and days like today happen. Today's conversation is happening at an incredibly important moment. We're on a cautious path back to normal, and I think we all want to emerge stronger than before COVID-19. Emerging technologies like artificial intelligence are changing how we work and live, and so it's a matter of competitiveness for states like ours in a global economy. Luckily for us, this work is already happening at so many different levels. In Ohio, there are incredible businesses and projects that are at the forefront of innovation, thanks to the leadership of Governor Mike DeWine, Lieutenant Governor John Husted, Jobs Ohio, and so many others. We now have 3 innovation districts in Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati that are creating opportunities for our cities and our state to be world leaders in fields like medicine, health, research, and more. In Central Ohio, we have what is called the Beta District. It's a place where emerging technology has found a home, and this Beta District is now a hub for things like testing connected vehicle technology and autonomous driving. In Dayton, there are flying cars and companies that are traveling to our state from places like New York City and Austin in order to test their technology. And while all of this is tremendous and so exciting and we love reading and seeing it, it can't happen without people, because people truly do make technology happen. And because of that, it all starts with education, and that's what today is about. This work isn't possible without a skilled and talented workforce, and in this age of artificial intelligence, it's going to shape every industry and corner of the world. Countries and states are going to race to lead, which means there's an opportunity for us here in Ohio. We have a rich history of innovative leadership, and that continues to this day. And I know that because of the people in this room and the leadership that we have, that we'll continue to lead well into the next decade and beyond. So thank you again, Alex and your team. Thank you for making this really, truly happen. I'm excited to participate. I'm also excited to learn.
Thanks, Chris. So we are going to move on to our keynote speaker, Lieutenant Governor John Husted. I believe he's either finishing up a call with the governor. So while he's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce him. So before he comes on, I'd like to talk briefly about why Ohio is so well represented here and why we're really focusing on Ohio as the state that we launched in. I met with John a year and a half ago when we were in the process of looking for a state to launch our program in. And he made a strong case that Ohio it's a microcosm of the US. And there's a huge contrast between our rural and urban and suburban communities. And Ohio is known for its heavily industrial economy. And we've been in the midst of a transformation as manufacturing transitions to services, healthcare, and technology. We selected Akron, Ohio to launch our pilot because we wanted to demonstrate that the communities who are facing the biggest challenges from AI-driven automation are also equipped to lead the efforts to address them. This isn't going to be an easy transformation, and states like Ohio will, and indeed have been, on the front lines of economic disruption driven by emerging technologies. But Ohio and the communities in Ohio have stepped up to the challenge. In no state have we seen as much enthusiasm as in Ohio for making AI literacy accessible to students. I think that's because Ohioans get it. We've navigated industrial revolutions before, like significant economic change and challenges, and we also know the stakes. And so I couldn't imagine a more symbolically important state to lead this country in this critical work. And so with that, I'd like to hand the virtual mic to Lieutenant Governor Husted, who I believe is now available. John is the 66th Lieutenant Governor of Ohio. He previously served as its Secretary of State, where he led it through underlying our government. He's the founder and director of Innovate Ohio, an intergovernmental initiative to enhance the state's ability to adapt to the new digital economy. And he also serves as the director of the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation, where he leads efforts to connect Ohio's business, training, and education communities to build a dynamically skilled, productive, and purposeful workforce. And so with that, I'll go ahead and let Lieutenant Governor onto the virtual stage. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. It's good to join you today. I hope everybody's doing well. This week, the good news this week is that almost every school in Ohio is back for in-person education. We appreciate those educators who have been doing that all along, and we appreciate those who have started again with that in-person education. I got to experience the fact they were in in-person education firsthand this morning when my daughter forgot her iPad, like she does often, and I had to bring it to school. So it's great to see those kinds of things happening because the kids need it. They've really struggled during this pandemic. They've been sort of the silent victims because it is not, the health issues have not impacted them, but the social, emotional, academic, other things have impacted them greatly. So let me just say that from my role inside the administration, I work on workforce issues, I work on innovation issues through Innovate Ohio, and I work on regulatory issues through the Common Sense Initiative. And these three things have come together in many ways in the work that I do. And I will just give you one AI example of things that we are doing in this administration. We are the first state in the nation, I believe, to license an AI machine learning tool to go through the entire revised and administrative code and come up with regulatory reform efforts, ideas, initiatives that then get organized for us, and things that would take a team of people to look through and months to do, we do in days, and then we put them together, and then we try to pull these packages together. Like, for example, getting everything that had to do with in-person meetings or paper processes or things like that, pulling them together across every state board, agency, you name it, and then pulling that together and then going to the legislature and say, we want to change all this. We don't believe that these kinds of approaches to government in in 2021 are the way that we should do things. And so AI is a very real part of state government reform in our administration. But there are other elements that are important to that, is having people trained, trusting the whole idea of how you interact with AI tools, making sure that as we look forward, we're going to have an educated and trained workforce to be able to do these kinds of things. And building that, from the ground level up. Last year in Ohio, I think this upcoming school year, we estimate we're gonna have about 49,000 high school students graduate with industry recognized credentials. And that's down from where it was in previous years. And we have a goal of hitting 70,000 in the next school year. We started off with our tech cred program trying to upskill 10,000 people a year. Now we're going to boost that number to 25,000 people a year to get upskilled. And where are most of these skills that we're trying to build? It's in tech, it's in cybersecurity, it's all across the spectrum of what students need and businesses need in Ohio. And as we come out of the pandemic, technology is more and more infused in every aspect of our lives and in the economy, and we have to get people educated. I may get in trouble from my staff. I don't know how much of this is known right now, but we're actually working on an idea with businesses to do high school tech internships, where we actually get the high school students working with businesses before they graduate. And tell you why I think this is important for our state. Not only do we want to develop the tech talent, but I know this firsthand from many experiences I had. If you get a student working with a business in Ohio, they're more likely to go to college in Ohio, and they're more likely to stay in Ohio after college to go to work. So we need to form these partnerships earlier in a student's career. We need to help businesses through tools like tech cred to upskill their workforce and make sure that they can do all of the things that they need, cloud, cybersecurity, robotics, you name it. All of those kinds of things are skills and tech skills that students need to compete, and that employers are saying that they want out of their workforce. I will share a story from the last couple of days that I had two employers that I talked with who basically said, we can't hire enough people. And this is pretty common, but these two conversations really stick out to me because one of them wants to expand, but for a variety of reasons, pandemic related, unemployment, lack of proper skills. Here we are in a pandemic. Here we are people saying that they're out of work, they can't find work. And we have employers that go begging because of these skill mismatches. That's got to be fixed. And the states and communities that do it right will be the ones that prosper, and the ones that don't will fall behind. And we don't want to be that state. We want to give the opportunity to people to earn the skills that will make them more employable, help them earn more, give them more job security, and also make sure that employers of this state have the talent they need. So those are just a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you this morning, or this afternoon, I guess it is. Time flies on me. And appreciate all of the work that you're doing, the goals that you have, and we look forward to working with all of you in these various endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. So our next talk is going to be a lightning talk from Michael Kanaan. Michael is the author of T-AI, which is a book about artificial intelligence that's been reviewed by folks like Google's Eric Schmidt. And he's the former chairperson of artificial intelligence for the US Air Force at the Pentagon, where he authored and guided the research, development, and implementation strategies for AI across the Air Force's global operations. He was named to the Forbes 2019 30 Under 30 list, and is part of the Fast Company Impact Council, and also received the US government's Arthur S. Fleming Award, an honor shared by past recipients Neil Armstrong, Robert Gates, and Elizabeth Dole. And so with that, Michael, we'll welcome you onto the virtual stage. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for your kind introduction, Alex. And good morning to some, good afternoon to the rest. I just want to start with expressing my appreciation to those here with us today, very personally and humbly, to have the opportunity to share, and that you have the genuine interest and care on the topic that will underpin the conversations of a generation. It's also quite befitting that it would be with so many leaders in the state of Ohio, a state that holds deep meaning to myself because it's where I began my AI journey just over about a decade ago in Dayton at a place called the National Air and Space Intelligence Center on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. In fact, it was where I held my first job after graduating commissioning from the Air Force Academy. Whether you're a government employee, researcher, or common citizen, there's no doubt you've gleaned a benefit in your life from that special institution. And despite any subsequent professional accolade, writing a book, chairing AI for the Air Force, it's the women and men of the missions we accomplished there, many Ohio residents, that I'm most proud of to this day, and I don't think that will ever change. And the point is that we each have our own individual AI journey towards understanding. AI, robotics, automation, software, algorithms, all those things you hear so much about will infiltrate and empower our lives, much like electricity does. But they will also profoundly disenfranchise those not represented in data or aware of the technology itself. It is the greatest newly developing suite of tools capable of profoundly enhancing human opportunity and experience, but it also presents a fundamental threat to us all, although it doesn't have to. And though it is now commonly employed as the foundational software and applications, products, and services throughout everyday life to the most sophisticated of business and geopolitical pursuits, it remains entirely misunderstood by common citizens the world over, and worse, in recent critical years, AI has been relatively ignored by democratic policymakers and our broader education system, while other opportunistic entities around the world are teaching and implementing its power to advance selfish pursuits, international agendas, and global disinformation campaigns. We here now must be a part of changing this. And while it's commonly anthropomorphized or confused with a world of terminators, most simply stated, AI is designed to capture, analyze, and then optimize human patterns and practices. Regardless of business or personal endeavor, it will be involved. Without care and control, however, it can unintentionally or purposefully infiltrate our privacies and even replicate and exasperate our worst inequities, biases, and abuses. And every day I speak with people from various parts of the private and public sectors, including leading tech firms, academic institutions, national research laboratories, and think tanks, and our US congressional members. In short, the message is the individuals, organizations, and nations at the forefront of AI are learning to wield tremendous new advantages over those that lag behind. But even for those at or near the lead, there are significant risks lurking in the days ahead. And for those that fail to keep pace, there will be substantial costs and losses to suffer. In the age of AI, second place will be of an ever diminishing and distant value. And to that end, that's my inspiration for being a part of the AI Education Project. It's that they understand that and are advancing at scale the right rudimentary understanding of the technology in an accessible and engaging way, unique to learners, and are provoking a common call for the future of our youth to leverage this new technology in the ways that they can ensure AI is only implemented in ways consistent with fundamental human dignities and only for purposes consistent with democratic ideals, liberties, and laws. It's 2021, and the digital divide still separates our youth from education and our urban and rural communities from opportunity. Emerging technologies are infringing on human rights across the globe, and yet our society doesn't discuss it or even know, at least to the extent we are generally aware of the conflicts and potential compromises we face moving forward. We all need to understand AI and provide the opportunity for others as well, such as our kids, our neighbors, frankly, just society. For those who one day look back upon these times should not be left wishing our eyes had been more open on the topic. Because at the end of it all, and has always been the case, the narrow and specific purposes to which we ourselves put our machines and technology will be where the problems arise and the solutions reside. It's not just for engineers, it's for everyone by necessity. Future rock stars in tech will be teachers, sociologists, dancers, artists, psychologists, parents, and so many more. So think of AI as a flashlight, a mirror, and or our canary in the coal mine. It illuminates otherwise ignored or undiscovered latent patterns memorialized in the world around us. In closing, we can bring this notion I just mentioned of AI into the future because we don't have a technology issue. We have a people problem. The limits of our language mean the limits of our world. Our work to educate starts by helping others speak in common terms, from a common understanding, from a shared set of experiences. So you can be ready for an uncertain future and be ready for what's to come professionally and personally. So thank you for being a part of that charge. I'm grateful to be here with you today, share the realities of AI, and work with the AI Education Project. Back to you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Michael. So before we get into our next panel, I think it's worth saying that we understand that most of you here are not AI experts, and that's actually by design. We're really, the thrust of this conversation is under the umbrella of workforce transformation, and that's because what AI will do, above all, is it's going to unlock new forms of automation and put new jobs potentially in the crosshairs. And so as we talk, basically the format of the next two panels, we're going to talk to Pat Tiberi and Mayor Nan Whaley about what does the future economy in Ohio look like? What are they hearing from the ground? And then the following discussion will be focused on solutions. So how can the K-12 community actually step up to the challenge of getting our students ready for the future that we're going to hear about? So with that, I'm going to welcome Pat and Mayor Whaley to the stage.
Hi, Alex.
Hello.
Hello, Alex. Hi, Mayor.
Hey, Pat.
And if I may, I'll do quick intros and then we can just dive right in. So Mayor Whaley is the mayor of Dayton, Ohio, as you know, and it's a role she's held since 2013. Prior to that, she served at the Dayton City Commission and was the youngest woman to have ever held a seat. Mayor Whaley is the second vice president of the National Conference of Democratic Mayors, and she's also the founding board member of Ohio's Mayor Alliance, a bipartisan coalition of Ohio's 30 largest cities. Pat Tiberi is the president of the Ohio Business Roundtable, where he served since 2017. And prior to leading OBRT, Pat was a congressman representing Ohio's 12th district for 17 years. Last year, actually in 2019, Governor Mike DeWine appointed Pat as chairman of the governor's executive workforce board, where he's responsible for advising the governor, lieutenant governor, and the Office of Workforce Transformation on emerging workforce needs, solutions, and best practices. So really two leaders with their fingers on the pulse of the state's business and economic trajectory. So Mayor Whaley, I'd like to start with you. And as many folks know, Dayton is really a true center of innovation. More than 3,500 technology class patents have been awarded to people and companies in Dayton over the past decade. And between the Air Force Research Lab and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the University of Dayton Research Institute, your city is a hotbed of innovation. So given your vantage point, what do you see coming down the line in the economy? What are the opportunities that are going to be available for the students and maybe even the parents out there? And how can they seize that?
Well, I think we're seeing considerable opportunity. Just yesterday, I was actually at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base with NASIC as well, where they're really looking to, as many engineers and recruiting as many engineers and scientists as they can. I think folks in Dayton know, but the Air Force Base is really, the Air Force's entire brain is sitting in Dayton, Ohio. And so that opportunity to really create a high talented workforce is key. And it's key for us to make sure that we protect that asset for our community and for the state. And that requires us to really talent up, particularly around these STEM jobs and the opportunity for engineers to come not only from the Dayton area, but across the entire greater region. And these are interesting jobs, right? They're public sector jobs, so they're actually a lot more safe than in the private sector as far as like longevity. They're very interesting too. A lot of the stuff that happens at the base, quite frankly, they can't even tell me what they're talking about, nor would I necessarily understand even as a chemistry major. So I think there's huge opportunity in our community for that. And we also have the challenge of automation really digging into our manufacturing sector. What we've seen in the manufacturing sector is it is getting much more advanced, which is great. We're actually producing more out of Dayton than we've ever produced before, but it's taking less and less people with a higher level of skill. And so in the private sector, particularly, this flexibility to continue to skill up, to change, and to really recognize that what the job looks like now could really look different even in 10 years, but there will still be need for us to make things in Dayton just the way we make them will be much more specialized, more computerized, and we're seeing that across our community. And so our community is doing our best to get ready for that, really in digging into K-12. I know you're going to talk about that more, but I'm really proud of the work that Learn to Earn Dayton and the entire community is doing to galvanize, to make sure that these high-paying jobs really stay in Dayton, and that they're also given to by Daytonians, which we think is important.
Yeah, and I think so that sort of dovetails nicely into my next question for you, Pat, which is, so we there's clearly this opportunity right in front of us, and we're already hearing, across the board that there's actually the opportunity to build an innovation hub in Ohio and put Ohio potentially, at the center of the conversation. Like, what's the role of the business community in fostering that?
Great question. A really important role, quite honestly. But thanks for having me today. It's an honor to be with the mayor of Dayton as well, Mayor Whaley. We at the Business Roundtable have been engaged in this since I got here, and it's one that is really important to all our members and really beyond our members in the business community. One of the benefits of our state, Alex, is that we have a really diverse economy. So the mayor just mentioned in Dayton we have the gem of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that is not only fantastic for Dayton, but quite frankly, the state and the region, the Midwest region. But we have an incredible higher ed system, both public and private. We've got some of the best public and private colleges that attract talent from all over the country. And we need to do a better job of keeping that talent here once they get here. But we have, we have a gem of a system, and we have other assets as well. Jobs Ohio, which is critically important to the process of workforce development and capital investment in our state. And before the pandemic, all our members, but really again beyond our members, were having a challenge of attracting that talent, getting that talent to their company, whether it be in Dayton or whether it be in Cleveland or Youngstown or wherever it might be. It was the same story, not only in different regions, but in different sectors of our economy. And we were beginning to better align what higher ed and tech schools were providing, what we're doing, with what our companies were needing. And one of my CEOs said in a non-tech field is our economy is transforming right before our very eyes, Alex. And we are all tech companies. Whether you're in retail, whether you're in manufacturing, whether you're in energy, you're an energy company doing tech work. And all of those fields are high in demand. And so as a business community, we are, and we'll get back to this when the pandemic subsides and we get back into a normal day-to-day economy, we as a state are competing with every other state on aligning that talent need with that talent, and trying to get those talented individuals to stay in our state when they graduate from the University of Dayton, when they graduate from the University of Cincinnati. And that is, that's a really key part of this. The state that figures it out and gets it right and makes this process and this alignment easiest, both for the student who's graduating from a tech school or a college or a 2-year school, and the employer that's wanting that talent, is going to be way ahead of the game in restoring some really great growth for really good paying jobs to their economy.
Yeah, I mean, so Mayor Whaley, you were in Dayton, you were leading Dayton through sort of the aftermath of the Great Recession, and you were right at the sort of epicenter of navigating, job automation and how do we create more opportunities? And based on what you've heard from Pat, and I'm just curious, like, what are your sort of priorities over the next few years to make sure that we're not just making up for maybe any lost ground from the last year, but actually positioned to really thrive, in the coming years?
Well, I think Dayton, because I would argue probably Dayton had the toughest Great Recession next to Detroit, just because of the sheer number of manufacturing jobs we hold along the I-75 corridor in this region. And so I think what that did for us was recognize that we have got to get very serious about getting our talent pool right. And we have seen, frankly, since the Great Recession, a suffering of wage, depression, particularly in manufacturing. And so that's a big part of our GDP. So that has affected people's quality of life in Dayton. But we also know that we have this mismatch that everybody talks about around engineering and science degrees that are high paying. So really being aggressive around this work has been key for us and getting our pipeline correctly. And it's not just about going to college, which is key, but it's also like having credentials and getting some of these mid pieces right around these technical jobs, like making sure all our kids get to Sinclair College, which is nearly free, so they can get that accreditation and get to work on a good paying job that can provide for their family. So that's like the goal that we've had in mind. We also know we have to be very flexible in this work, right? I think Dayton's learned that, what can be here today can be gone tomorrow in this kind of really wild period of time in our country. And we've seen that for sure during this pandemic. As folks have said, we've all learned how to do Zoom and how to really work in a very different way. So how quickly we can really be flexible to the needs of our community to really hit that growth is something that we're really focused on. The other thing I'll say is, Dayton is one of 24 cities in the country that has invested in high quality preschool for every 4-year-old, and something I'm very proud of. We recognize we got to get this pipeline right at the beginning, that we have to give everybody a fair shot to kindergarten. We have gross inequities when it comes to people of color getting those accesses, and we're leaving talent on the table when we do that. And so really leaning into that work and leaning into the K-12 pipeline, so we get all of our kids graduated from high school and give them the opportunity to, get accredited, get a community college degree, or go on to college, all of our great options, or join the military, something that, Dayton is very committed to with a high number of veterans. So I think this is a huge opportunity for us. And I think we learned so much from the Great Recession that in this region, you're seeing some real great movement, really leading the country on how we're trying to get our talent pipelines right. And I'm really, really proud of that work that's going on here. And I think we learned that, frankly, the hard way through the Great Recession.
Yeah, so I think what's so important about what you just said, Mayor Whaley, is there's a long time frame between the action that needs to be taken and sort of the downstream impacts that those actions have. And I think that's why this conversation we think is so critical now, is because if you believe that 10 years from now, Ohio's future is predicated on our ability to feed that innovation economy, we have to start today and make sure that, even starting from preschool, as you said, like that we're taking the steps that we need. Pat, I'm curious, like, do you have a sense of the time frame here? I mean, are we already in the midst of this, or is this a decade away? I mean, what are you hearing on the ground with the CEOs that you're talking to?
Oh, we're in the midst of this. And the pandemic obviously kind of caused everybody to hit a pause button in many ways. But let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So prior to the pandemic, over a year ago now, we at the Business Roundtable with our chairman, Nick Akins at American Electric Power, and a few of our other members helped set up a collaboration of business, labor, education, all of them. And it culminated in a new office being funded in Central Ohio at the Columbus State Community College of office talent strategies. And the whole goal of it, and again, Central Ohio it just happened to be that our chairman lives in Central Ohio. So that's where we started, and we were going to replicate it in other regions of the state. But you had a group of employers who were willing to fund this new office. All of them shared one common problem, and that's attracting talent in technologies. So this office, and it's Columbus State, so it's a 2-year school. To the mayor's point, not everybody needs a 4-year degree or an advanced degree. You can get in this pathway without a college degree, or maybe a credential, or maybe a 2-year degree. And in this particular case, these are 2-year degrees or credentials in cloud computing, cloud technologies, data analytics, cyber, and there are a number of our members in Central Ohio who are part of this because they all have a need. They all have a need of these new developing technologies that pay well, by the way, And so it's an opportunity, quite frankly. And so we also began, I'll just kind of end with this, having these conversations. In Honda, one of our members does this the best. They do it in manufacturing. They start talking to kids in middle school about the opportunities that Honda provides and the different types of careers you can have and what it means to have this career. And you don't have to get a 4-year degree. You can get a 4-year degree if you want. You can get an engineering degree and you can do this, but you can get a credential and do this. You can go to Ramp Tech and do that. And so having those conversations with kids, having better alignment with K through 12, but also post 12th grade with the business community, with organized labor, because we're all in this together. And again, the state that figures this out the best between the public sector, the private sector, education is going to be way ahead for our future workforce. But it's happening as we speak.
Can I just say something too, Alex, to lay on what Pat was saying, which is, I think, exactly right too. I also think, as we're seeing just a tremendous change, and I think, the pandemic is also just, really showing that how quickly this can change. We also have to recognize that there's just a cultural shift around how we think about work going on in our communities and across our country. And that is going to also affect the flexibility of our communities as well and how well we move through this, right? So I think this whole idea that we have to just keep this whole idea of lifelong learning and keeping our community curious, right, is the way that we will really attract this innovative and strong job culture in the future. And so today, this afternoon, I'm actually virtually opening, for example, the Arcade Entrepreneur Center. That's a partnership with the University of Dayton and the Entrepreneur Center here in Dayton. It's downtown. We've redone a building that everyone is very emotionally attached to really show this opportunity of how we can move folks and people can start their own businesses. They can, do work in tech and really try to connect that. And I think that we have to continue in our communities across the state to stay to really get more competitive, frankly, is to change this cultural idea of just constant curiosity of lifelong growth around our workforce, because that will be the kind of jobs that we will really want and the kind of jobs that will really grow our cities and our communities across the state. So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, and so I'd like to close with kind of a bridge to our next conversation, which is a discussion about solutions. And we have dozens of district superintendents and principals and educators with us today. And one of the things we know is that Mayor Whaley, Pat, you like live and breathe this, but for a lot of students who may come from families that maybe don't even have, their parents don't even have a college education, they don't necessarily have access to this information. They're not learning about what lifelong learning means. They don't really understand what the high opportunity versus high risk pathways are. So, how do you see the role of K-12 specifically in sort of seeding both the inspiration, but also some of that practical knowledge to just guide students in the right direction?
Well, I really like these ideas that Learn to Earn has done in Dayton with these high school internships and really giving students that don't have family members that went to college, aren't part of the legacy of tech jobs. And we're going to have to do this. We don't have enough tech jobs to do this without building, parents that work in manufacturing to really get their children to think about this. I think that, exposing opportunities to children and during K-12 and giving them the opportunities in classroom, but then also outside of classrooms about these jobs, like Pat was talking with Honda, is very, very key. And really being intentional about that work. And that's what we've done here in the region, that we're just starting this work that's I think been great and is very exciting, getting kids thinking about being engineering. I mean, Dayton still is one of the per capita largest engineering regions in the country, but we still need more. We still need more of these scientists. And so how we continue to grow that in the K-12 curriculum is key. And I think if we think about it, how fast this country and the world is moving can really kind of take your breath away as a leader or someone doing this work. But this has been going on for the past 100 years. In the 1940 census, there was only one of the 3 jobs that existed in 1940 exists today. This is what we do. It is at a faster rate. And so that requires our leadership and our education systems to be more flexible, more nimble, and faster in changing as well. And that's hard on all of us, but it is necessary for the future of the communities of this city, these cities in the state.
Yeah, Pat, I mean, do you mind responding to that a bit? And like, you know, when I've talked to folks in, you know, Ohio government, what I hear over and over again is there are community level solutions to this that can move really quickly and help us, you know, respond with the agility that's necessary. And I'm curious, like, does that resonate with you? You know, how like the community focused response versus like a statewide top down solution to this?
You know, the mayor hit the nail on the head. I think first off, you have to have better communication from public officials, Democrats and Republicans. What the mayor said about the evolving nature of our economy for the past 100 years is so true. And when you have something disruptive like AI, you're going to have people take advantage of that to make excuses of what it's doing when it's really not doing. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So I grew up in a household in Columbus, Ohio, first in my family to graduate from high school, let alone go to college. But my dad and mom wanted me to go to college because my dad lost his job when I was in high school, a manufacturing job that wasn't lost because of any sort of trade policy. It was lost because that job went away because of technological advances. You rarely hear that about technological advances causing jobs to go away. But that has been part of society from the very beginning. And that will continue. And it's continuing at a faster pace now with advances in technology. And so my dad said, you need to go to college to get a degree to better yourself, quite frankly. But even in areas of the white collar workforce, we're seeing advances that no one quite understands. And it's happening again right as we speak. And this is impacting not only the federal budget, the state budget, but city budgets, because we know now the future of work is different than what it was a year ago. We don't know exactly what that means, but it's going to impact how people are taxed in cities where they maybe used to work and maybe aren't working anymore because they don't have to physically be there. And so AI has, and technology in general, has and will continue to change what we're doing. And what we have to do is we have to have responsible business leaders, public leaders, education leaders, all trying to educate the public on, in the end, this is good. If we are learning more, getting better, becoming more efficient, learning as we age, lifelong learning, these are all things that are positive if we continue to educate people that change is good. Because sometimes in America, people on both sides of the aisle, they make change sound bad, but once we are providing all this information that makes us more efficient as a society, keeps us healthier longer potentially, allows us to do more with less, it's actually a fun opportunity, and we're living in an amazing time as things can change so darn quickly. So I think it's just leadership is important. And making sure that, like someone for me, this is why K through 12 is so important, is having educators make sure that kids, as they're growing up, understand these opportunities. And it doesn't always mean, like the mayor said, that it requires a 4-year degree or an advanced degree. We're living in a time where you can actually create a pathway through a credential or through a different opportunity that doesn't necessarily require somebody to go and get a 4-year degree at college.
It's a great way to end this conversation. There's, you know, obviously a lot of challenges around the speed of the change, but there really is an opportunity, and I agree with you. This is not just an opportunity for the country, but specifically for Ohio. So Mayor Whaley, Pat, thank you so much for joining. I'm pleased to hand the microphone to my co-founder and the AI Education Project's Chief Learning Officer, Ora D. Tanner. And Ora is going to be joined by an incredible panel. So I'll let her do those introductions. And yeah, thank you again for everybody for sticking with us.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'm really enjoyed that panel. Like there were so many good nuggets. But now, as you stated, we're going to really look at how can we help Ohio schools respond to this accelerating innovation. So we heard from Lieutenant Governor Husted, Michael Kanaan, about the incredible pace of technology innovation. We just heard from Pat Tiberi and Mayor Whaley about what the future economy will look like in Ohio, one that requires a workforce equipped with new skills to harness innovative technologies. Now we're going to talk about the solutions, what is working. So how can we help Ohio schools respond to accelerating innovation? And how can various stakeholders, many who are here, government, business, civil society, support these efforts? So I'm about to bring up our esteemed panelists. First up, we have Paulo Di Maria, who is the superintendent and has served as Ohio's superintendent of schools for the past 4 years. Prior to this role, he has spent 24 years in public service, including as an associate superintendent of the Center for School Options and Finance. Also joining on the panel is Matt Huffman. President Huffman is the current Senate Majority Leader in the Ohio State Senate. Previously, he served 4 terms in the Ohio State House of Representatives and on the Lima City Council. And his background is in law, and he is originally from Lima, Ohio. Brad McLean is president of AT&T Ohio, which means he is responsible for AT&T's public policy, philanthropy, and community relations initiatives in Ohio. Brad has worked at AT&T for 8 years, and his previous titles were director and AVP. Prior to AT&T, Brad worked for a boutique government relations firm, and his background is in political science and public affairs. And finally, we have with us also on the panel, Dr. Don Pope Davis, who is Dean of the College of Education and Human Ecology at the Ohio State University. And he's been an educator for over 25 years and previously worked at New Mexico State University and the University of Notre Dame. And he focuses on equity and minority issues, especially when related to psychology, which is his background. So I'd like to welcome you all here. So I am going to start off with President Matt Huffman. And we know as the pace right now, of course, of economic transformation is accelerating, how do you think we can make sure schools are able to respond quickly with tailored approaches to workforce readiness that are aligned to the demands and opportunities in local and regional communities?
And Ora, I think actually we're having some technical stuff with President Huffman. So I'd actually, maybe we should open up to the rest of the panel if they want to respond, or if you just want to move on to the next question.
Sure.
Okay. So I'll move on to, unless anyone wants to take that question, does anyone want to respond what they think schools can do? If not, I will move on to Superintendent Di Maria. If you could talk a little bit about Ohio has a 5-year strategic plan called Each Child, Our Future, which states that each child will see the relevance of his or her learning, be exposed to practical real-world work settings, and begin defining his or her future during high school. What role do you think the nonprofit community plays in helping to bring these opportunities to schools and teachers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And frankly, I think it even extends beyond the nonprofit community, because I think so many times, and as I was listening to Pat Tiberi and Mayor Whaley talk, I came away with this sense that we really need to stress more and more collaboration and interaction among the different sectors, right? Because sometimes we in K-12 sit in our own silo, and our partners in higher education sit a little bit in their silo, and the business community sits in their silo, and maybe even our pre-K system sits in their silo. And I think what we're finding more and more is that we can't think about talent management and talent development in isolation, right? We have to think of it as a system that spans sort of birth to continuing learning on, in a career. That means that the K-12 system has to do more to interface with the pre-K system, but we also then have to look to our higher ed partners as well as our business community and seeing more interaction and interface with them in terms of shaping what we do in the K-12 space, as well as what we're doing to prepare our students better for what comes after high school, to your point, which is what our strategic plan says. We want students to be prepared, but we need the involvement of those who are at that next level, both in the higher education space and in the employer space, to be partners with us in both understanding what those realities look like and what are the competencies and skills that are needed by our students. One of the things the Lieutenant Governor and I earlier this week announced the awards for some of our highest performing business advisory councils. Our business advisory councils are often these unsung entities that work largely at the local level. So when Alex asked that question about state versus local, I'm a real champion for what happens at the local level, because local employers partnering with their local school districts are providing those exact real world opportunities. We had some of our award winners doing internships, creating free apprenticeship programs, really showing students the relevancy of those kinds of things that come after high school and what opportunities are available to them, what kind of skills and abilities they have to have, and how they can master those skills and abilities, and maybe even have part-time work-based experience or paid work-based experiences while they're in high school to give them a really solid underpinning in that particular sector or that particular occupation. We also have places where the higher ed community is partnering very closely. We've got great credit transferability in Ohio. And so lots of partnerships emerging between the higher ed community and the K-12 community in the same vein. How can we make sure the students we're preparing are well equipped to be successful when they get onto Dean Pope Davis's campuses or into the workplace? So again, I think as the world changes, some of our instructional areas need to change as well. But what I encourage people to do, nonprofit philanthropic, nonprofit advocacy, higher ed, and the business community is, and frankly, it's incumbent on the K-12 community, bring these partners together, collaborate, learn from each other, and frankly, benefit our students by that knowledge and understanding as they advance to their futures.
Thank you so much. And I see we have President Huffman on. Did you want to respond to what Superintendent DeMaria was talking about, this idea of collaborations that are needed among the different stakeholders?
Sure, and I apologize for the technical glitch there. It's certainly all my fault, and I'm not sure what happened, but I'm going to blame myself anyway. But I had, one of the things that we are working with in education in the United States, and Ohio certainly is no different, is an educational system, like many of our systems, that were created, in our case, about 100 and so years ago, 120 years ago. And like all education, all institutions, companies, change is very difficult. We have change more quickly in the private sector and in some private sector businesses than others, because there are people who see what needs to be done. This is how great entrepreneurs create businesses when 5 years ago, nobody thought of that, or 10 years ago. So the change in education is very difficult because we have people who are ensconced in their particular areas. And what I think we need to do is to try to make the educational system, the K-12 system in particular, more market-based. And that's one part only, but only one part of the school choice movement. And so set that aside for a second. And then I think the second thing I would say is many of these wonderful things that we're talking about, especially as it relates to technology, tend to benefit those who are in the best position, who are already benefited because they have a built out system, a network of people, maybe it's parents or family or extended family, older brothers and sisters, who've been through all of this. And you think about who the best, in particular, it's a lot easier for the child of a professional golfer to be a professional golfer than someone who isn't, simply because they have that. And so we build these great systems. We all have iPhones, and one of the things that's happens is people are much more efficient. But those who are already the most efficient are even more efficient, and some people still aren't. And so the question is, how do we help as many people as possible, including the people who really need the help most? And so that's part of the school choice movement. It's part of extending broadband, not just to rural areas that need it, but the urban areas who have not been serviced by the private market because they can't pay $80 a month for broadband service. So those are the kinds of things. And finally, I would say, and I agree with the superintendent, that it would be nice if the state of Ohio could say, here's a magic web and this all now works better. That's simply not possible. And communities have to step up, and community leaders. And it's really important who your local mayor is, or your county commissioners are, or your school superintendent, and the township trustees and the school board, because, I think, and this is a little bit of a, I think to myself, 50 or 60 years ago, maybe people who ran for city council were the leaders and innovators in a town. Sometimes today they're not. Sometimes they're, who can we get to fill that seat? And because people tend to look at running for public office as, well, that's not something I would do. They really look down upon government service. But how we accomplish these things on a local level depends on the leaders that are in those towns. So that's about a three-part answer. Hopefully I hit on most of the things you wanted me to talk about.
No,
I just want to put in a plug for the senator's hometown, Lima. They have Makerfest there. What a fantastic example of businesses and students and educators coming together to highlight the fantastic jobs that are in that community, and ultimately trigger the imaginations of those students about how they can make a great life for themselves. And I know the senator's aware of that and has been a supporter of that. It's one of the perfect examples for communities that are looking to do exactly what the senator has said, bring people together. That's a great example.
Yeah, I know you said that in part just so that everyone would know how to pronounce my hometown of Lima, Ohio, superintendent.
I did indeed.
But just, and that's an example. What that event started out in 2007, 2008. I was a new state rep, and I would hear these sort of same things about, here's what employers need. And they would say it to me, and they'd say it to higher education. And I said, well, you know what, why don't we get everybody in a big room? And we're not going to have the government and education saying, here's what you employers need to do. We flipped the conversation and said, tell us what we need to do so that you have a workforce, whatever it may be. And we did that for 2 or 3 years. And then, the folks who are now running it as Makerfest, do a better job, I think, in having that conversation. So, people in government don't run manufacturing plants, and people in education don't. But if we're trying to help manufacturing or technology or whatever it may be, we're all generalists in the legislature. None of us are experts, except maybe on the little thing we came from. So we only learn by learning from the people who know.
So if I can weigh in on a conversation from where I sit here, and thank you for mentioning the Ohio State. Otherwise, I wouldn't speak to you. But more seriously, the concern and solutions that you've been talking about. The gap here is that we still, as we talk about moving forward, we still have people in our respective communities that are still left behind, particularly in the technological areas. So as we're talking about AI, and I think that's the direction we're going in, the question is, what we see in some of the early information and I want to call it information opposed to data because it's still being gathered, is the gap isn't closing as we thought it might be. And so we have teachers, we have principals, we have superintendents, we have people involved in education, where in the COVID environment, the technological engagement isn't where we would like it to be so that there can be a much more sustained engagement. And so while I think it's important for us, and I support the perspective that we have to partner with local businesses and so forth, the conversation has to be flipped. And I think this is what both of you have been suggesting. Can you imagine beginning a conversation with a community first and then developing a strategy? Our approach has always been, as most of you know, is let's bring in the experts who have done the scholarship and have done the studies. That's an important part of it. But I continue to be amazed when I go into the communities where community members around technology, around workforce development say, that's not what we need here. Let's take a couple of steps back. And so when I hear talking heads articulating a pedagogical model that is more historical than contemporary, that in itself presents some challenges for us. So part of our job, I believe, is to be disruptive in this model, is to be transformative and to say, how can we do this differently, given what's at stake for our community, particularly the citizens of Ohio, and recognize that whether you live in Lima or you live in Columbus, that the experiences of each of those communities are different yet similar in a variety of ways. And so how do you bring those communities together? And I think this conversation has to include community partners, community activists. And I don't only mean that in the business sense. I'm beginning to have conversations with ministers, with people who provide food and pantries. What are you seeing? What are you experiencing? So that we can do better here in our college when we train teachers and look at the ways in which technology can engage these communities. And so there's that gap that is still there. And I'd like to see a conversation, not just about jobs, but what is the infrastructure that is going to be needed in order to do that? And how do we treat and engage the people in those communities to do that? And so when we look at our teacher education program, we recognize as we begin to train more and more, and we have over 700 students placed throughout the state of Ohio in our teacher education program, one of the largest in the country. And some of that information that comes back to us is that I'm going into communities and school districts that don't have the same resources that we have at the Ohio State. So how do we bridge that gap? How do I help those school districts? How do those school districts get help and assistance? And then you add on top of this, and in order to be solution-based in this model, the cultural diversity in those communities, both economic, social, religious, all of those kinds of things that allow for a transformation that I think is so important. And so when we think about workforce development, we here at Ohio State are developing some programs, some degree programs in this area, but we're also seeing on the front end the need to have certain requisite skills in order to be able to participate in those jobs and those opportunities. So I agree with the comment about the silos. The silos part of this is very important. And so at the end of the day, I think we also need to develop a model that says, here's what we will measure success by, or more importantly, what will success look like? So we can begin to benchmark in talking about advancing the workforce. Is it an increase in GDP? Is it less job employment? Is it more degrees, high school graduates, and so forth, creating technology hubs? there are a variety of solutions that I think we could come up, given the brain power and the commitment of everybody on this call.
Thank you so much. And I love that doing more an aspirations-based approach instead of a needs-based approach. Like, what is it that the community aspires to do? So I'm gonna bring in Brad McLean into the conversation. He's president at AT&T Ohio. So kind of going along in this vein with, that localized community-based approach. I know that AT&T has the Believe Cleveland initiative that's aiming to cultivate, deep, diverse talent pipelines and educate future workers. Can you please share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure, and happy to be a part of this. And Senator Huffman, I'm from a town in Kentucky called Versailles, not Versailles, it's Versailles. So I get that all the time. I feel your pain. I feel your pain. Yeah, well, thanks, Laura. And the conversation I think really stems from a lot of different places, and the basic need out there, that we're trying to solve through Believe Cleveland is digital literacy across all spans of communities, different age groups, et cetera. But, to the point, early education to, adults who are trying to further their education to be more employable. That's something that we're working on and want to continue to work on. Over the last several years, since 2008, our foundation and our signature program, the Aspire program, focuses on, really trying to develop programs through education, through tech-focused programs, but not just at the mid or high level, down to the basic educational levels of digital literacy themselves. And for us, that's extremely important, because without that base knowledge, then you're not going to be able to participate in the modern economy, and that's something that we're really invested in and interested in, not only in Cleveland but all across Ohio. And look, we understand the need for the public-private partnership part of this, and that's why we're going to continue to have those conversations. We do have one of the largest accelerator programs in the country. And I encourage everyone to look into that. I'm happy to provide any information on that, the AT&T Aspire Accelerator, that really focuses on enhancing education through mentorship, funding innovative tech startups in the ed tech space. So again, I appreciate being part of this conversation. We obviously hire thousands of people each year across the country, and we need those folks to be ready on day one, and we want to be a part of making sure that can happen.
Thank you so much. So hope everyone was taking notes, because they were dropping serious gems. We'll be able to continue this conversation in the breakouts, but we're going to close out this discussion. I'd like to ask each one of our panelists to share in 30 seconds or less, from your vantage point, what do you think should be Ohio's top priority to help prepare K-12 students for this workforce transformation in the state over the next 12 months? What should be that top priority? And I'll start with President Huffman.
Well, thanks. I think the top priority is to continue the evolution of our K-12 system as a nimble, responsive, not only to the things we're talking about today, but the other needs of every student. And when we draw up master plans, inevitably those master plans we make a lot of assumptions, as some of the folks in the chat room have said, about how this will affect people. And it never affects everybody the same way. And so if we have a system that is nimble, that can respond, not only in the public school system, but using private partners and all the other innovations, some of which became clearer during the last year. That's really, I think, the most important thing. Let's begin to look at the 21st century and the 22nd century, and not the system that we designed in the 19th century.
Thank you so much. Superintendent DeMaria.
Yeah, I would just emphasize, the bringing together of the K-12 higher ed and the business community with the view towards a much more sort of integrated and systemic approach to understanding both what the needs are present and future, and how the education experience can create the relevancy, the interest, the passion for what those futures for students will look like, and set them on a path to success. I also think it's worth mentioning in my last 10 seconds, this notion that I think Michael brought up in terms of the ethics of AI. As he was talking, I saw a poster on his wall of Star Wars, and I thought for sure he was going to say AI is like the Force. It can be used for good and it can be used for evil, right? And that somehow we need to continue to emphasize that aspect of this work for our students in this world where a lot of times those ethical issues are very blurry.
Thank you. Dr. Pope Davis.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I like to do is think about if there are a group of people like us having this conversation 10 years from now, what would they say we missed in the conversation? And so when you think about AI, technology, workforce development, the ability to look forward but also look back, because many of us, as you know, we criticize those people who were here 10 years ago for failure to do certain things. So how do we avoid that? The pieces, and I think part of the answer, some of the things that my other panelists have said, and I particularly like the piece that Brad had mentioned in his part, I know this, and what I would add to Brad's notion of public-private partnership is as we move forward, what has to be continually engaged in that is public and private partnership has to have at its center the community. What is the community's voice in that conversation? And I'm not suggesting that that's not happening in Brad's area, but I think we need to make that explicit because unless we do that, we'll be sitting here 10 years from now talking about similar kinds of things, and we see that gap widening. And so education has a role in that, of developing new and different pedagogies, and having people who are on this call who have this experience to bring it to our attention with an element of engagement so that we can begin to transform our community in new and different ways. And my last comment is, as we transform our communities, we do not all need to look the same.
Thank you. And we're gonna wrap things up with Brad.
Yeah, and I'll be really brief. I think what everyone has said, I think it's critical. What the one thing I'll add on, and to the dean's point about the community, I think every business, every enterprise, no matter what, and I think Pat said it earlier, we're all tech companies now, whether we like it or not. We have to continue to engage and collaborate across businesses. AT&T is one sector, but Honda was mentioned earlier. We've got to continue to collaborate not only as different sectors of industry, but as one larger coalition to work with those who are educating, those who are making the policies, and those in the community who can see, really what's happening on the ground. So I hope that that's the focus, and I know I certainly want to play our part in making that work.
Thank you so much. I would invite everyone to give hand claps or snaps to everyone on this panel. This was phenomenal. I'd like to thank you all for coming out and sharing your perspectives. We hope to continue this conversation in the breakouts. I'm going to turn it back over to Alex.
Thanks so much, Aura. So yeah,